Yeah, welcome to Quit to Win, the show where we explore the courageous decision people make to let go of what no longer serves them, so they could actually step into a better, fuller version of life. Our today's guest is Jody Brooks, coach, workplace well-being consultant, and founder of Authentic Coaching. From the outside, Jody appear highly successful, senior leadership roles, an award-winning business owner, international career achievement. But beneath it all, he was battling burnout, anxiety, depression, and eventually suicidal thinking. What made Jody's stories powerful is not just what he survived, but what he chose to quit. Self-betrayal, people pleasing, living out of alignment, and the pressure to keep pretending everything was fine. Out of that painful season, he reviewed his life and developed his 9 principles of authentic living, a framework helping people move from overwhelm to clarity, confidence, and authentic performance. It's really a pleasure and honor to have you on the show.
No, thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much. So, Judy, from your experience, what was the first thing you had to quit before your real transformation could begin?
Had to make a conscious decision to get off of the hamster wheel. And so before I tried to do anything else and before I made any decisions about what I was going to quit, I just had to stop and allow myself some time to look at what was really going on around me, what the kind of what I did need, because I think we so often in those moments we're being pushed forward all the time so much that even in times where we feel stressed or burnt out like I did, it's easy to add more into that, even though we think it's a positive. So, it's easy to say, okay, well, I'd be less stressed if I meditate. So now I'm going to add meditation in.
Yeah.
And I'd be better if I had my diet. And so we actually then kind of perpetuate it even more because we don't actually stop. And so for me, it was the moment I decided to stop and make no decisions and allow the dust to settle almost before I could then decide, okay, now let's make some decisions. Now the noise is shut out. Now all of that pressure is switched off. Now make some decisions with a clear head.
Yeah, this is really amazing. Being that I think it just aligns a particular quote that I have that, yeah, don't make decision when you are overly happy, and don't make decision when you are overly sad. And it just speaks volumes to having the balance and having to calm yourself, call yourself from every engagement, sitting down to look deeply before the decision has been made. And it's really lovely. So you have spoken uh, about self betrayal. How did that show up in life before you recognize it?
I think that self betrayal is in those things when we're people pleasing and when we're on that hamster wheel again, and we end up caught in cycles of behavior where we have expectations with people or they have an expectation of us, and it doesn't essentially serve us. I always say, like, this is your road and your purpose is down this road, and what happens is we kind of veer off like this kind of thing, and that's what I call betrayal. It's the
Yeah.
moment you move away from yourself to serve others. And I believe that we should live a life in service of others, but that life, whilst in service to others, must be in service to ourselves.
Yeah.
And it's very easy because when you try to do that, that might feel selfish because it kind of, you're saying, well, I'm only doing it if there's something in it for me. But the reality of it is that if you don't do it aligned to you and you veer off, whatever you're doing on that pathway is not authentic. And at some point it will go wrong because it can only go so far until you're pulled back. And at that point, that's where we lose relationships, we leave jobs on bad terms, all of those things. Because instead of staying aligned and making a decision in alignment with who we are and remaining in service to ourselves so that we can turn up as our best self in service to others. And so that betrayal almost starts feeling like a sense of guilt within inside us because we deep down inside we know, we might not know it straight out, but that's the beauty of stopping and spending time sitting in that, is to really understand what is going on in that moment. And the further you go that way, the more the guilt builds up.
Yeah.
And the harder it gets. And, we've all done it. We've committed to do something for someone and it starts out great and we think it's going to be a small favour. And then 6 months down the line, you're in that situation and you're dreading it. Like whatever it might be, it becomes an annoyance. And that's exactly what I meant about not turning up authentically, because eventually you'll start turning up with resentment, and it will start to go wrong. And then that's where the guilt, the shame, all of those things start to kick in.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. I think this a whole lot to actually get to pack in here, being that yeah, it just speaks volumes too. We can't love others perfectly if we didn't love ourselves. If we didn't handle the decision we actually make towards more like our goals and aspirations. Sometimes living for others can look as though it's pressure, but in there is going to be as though there's eternal battles and a whole lot of things, and it just speaks volumes too. Yeah, staying true to your authentic self while honoring what, why seeking to actually more like please others and being help to humanity. Self has to kind of being a help to yourself too, so that at the end of the day, you're going to live in balance, be with yourself, and being true to what you're doing. It's really amazing. So, at what moment do you realize that continue to push through was no longer sustainable for you?
Because I always say to people that, a burnout has two elements. It has an emotional and a psychological element, and a physical element. Now, there are times where we all have to push through in work, and we have to give more, and physically we have to push, and we have to do a longer shift or a couple of weeks back to back. And in that, we can experience physical exhaustion, and we can be exhausted. But that's not essentially burnout. So I always think it's important to clarify that difference, because sometimes when you talk about that, there's again shame, because people, like, it's like, well, God, why couldn't he push through, or why couldn't he do it, etc.
Yeah,
Like, just step up. Like, we're busy, we need all hands to the
yeah,
desk. Like, you've got to like crack on. But for short periods of time, that's fine. But when you sustain that, exhaustion leads to then an emotional tiredness. And so
yeah,
I always say, with burnout, it's hard to say which comes first, emotional or physical, because it's a bit like a chicken and egg.
yeah,
Sometimes the emotional comes first. So, in jobs where it's maybe not physically demanding, but it's mentally demanding, then that one shows up first, and our brain becomes overloaded. And then into that, the physical, it starts to show in physical signs. So burnout is both those two things. It's a feeling of physical exhaustion, and also a feeling of emotional exhaustion, brain fog, lack of focus, really struggling to
yeah,
pull through. And for me, instead of listening to the signs when they were early, I just kept pushing. Everyone, I think we do it all the time, and we're like, if I just get to that week, or if I just get to Friday, and then it's, if I just get through today, the time frame gets shorter and shorter. You start out saying, well, like, if I get to next week, it'll be fine, and then eventually you're like, oh my God, is it not lunchtime? It's that point there, there are some really horrible consequences of pushing through that,
yeah,
in terms of your mental health and how far it goes. For me, that's what it was, is I knew that this was a health choice. This was no longer a career choice, a job choice. This was about my health and
yeah,
my well-being. And if I didn't say stop and call time, then I would have been ill. At that point, remember that the side effects of things like burnout are lower immune system. You're not producing serotonin, you're not producing oxytocin, so depression goes hand in hand with it. But the problem is it's such a slow, silent progress that, unfortunately, when those things show up, it's too late. You can't just have a day off, a day in bed, etc. I would say, if I think through my experience and my clients, if you push yourself to that point of complete burnout, it will take you anything from 3 to 6 months, and even 12, to feel that you're okay again, because you have completely
yeah.
driven your system into the ground.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. And it really speaks a whole lot of volumes, being that, yeah, one get to happen first and before the other, and having to take cognizance of what is going on and being able to know when to pause so that you won't soon drive it towards the end point. And when it take a whole lot of days to actually get to recover back, it's really amazing. But so many people actually more like confuse endurance with strength. So what did quitting unhealthy endurance teach you?
I think endurance is a much wider thing. I think strength is, when we talk about strength, it's very much a physical thing. Whereas, if you like, endurance is almost the counterbalance to burnout. It's the combination of both physical strength and mental strength. And, it's our ability, to use those in combination to get through a tough period in time. But everybody's levels of endurance are different, and every job will have different levels of endurance. And so, you can't, clients ask all the time, and I'm like, there is no magic number, no magic point, no magic anything. That is the point. You have to listen to your body, because what I can endure is entirely different to the person sat at the desk next to me and the person on the other side of the room. We all have different levels of endurance, and you can improve your endurance by making sure that you have that balance in your life. So, and I would say that again, the antidote to burnout is that level of endurance. If you think about a long distance runner, and they would work on their endurance to be able to run the distance, and so in that they know when to sprint, they know when to slow down, they know when to hydrate, they know when to eat. They prepare their bodies weeks before, even the meal before they run. They prepare to do that, because that's endurance as a skill. Endurance is a skill, and it will be unique to you. And you need to understand what you need in order to maintain your endurance. And that's, again, that betrayal is, we don't do that. That's that point of coming out of service to yourself. Those are the things that you do that keep you in service to yourself. And they allow you to show up and give 100%. Because when you don't do that, you're only showing up giving maybe 50% if you're lucky. Because you're not at your performance. You haven't got your endurance and your peak performance. So back to that authenticity again, you're not showing up authentically. And, one of the things still now, I work as a coach now, and I work from home a lot of the time. And I think when I first started doing that and having come out of the corporate world, I didn't think burnout was going to be a problem, because I just assumed burnout was something that existed in the workplace, not when you're self-employed and you're the boss. And that still became very, very real. It didn't, and I acted. And so now I have, in terms of endurance, I have a very set structure to my day. And once an hour, I get up from my desk and I go downstairs, I drink a cup of water, I play with my dog for 10 minutes, and then I go back to my desk. In the next hour, I will produce more work than if I'd sat there and pushed through those 10 minutes. And so that's the skill of endurance. The skill of endurance is to fully understand the expectation and then prepare yourself both mentally and physically to meet the demands of that situation. It is not turning up at the start line and just running and not knowing how far you're supposed to be going. Whether it's a 100-meter sprint or a marathon, they take different quantities of endurance, preparation and time. And so that is being true to yourself and staying in service to yourself, is making sure that you're fit for the race.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much for the elaborate. I think it just speaks volumes that, yes, being in the corporate world, there's a whole lot of things to actually more like get to. Yeah, amazing. Can you hear me? Let's just dive into some of the principles you actually had that you used to make decisions in difficult times. So what role did the 9 principles in helping you make difficult decisions today?
I think, the 9 principles was born out of my journey through midlife.
Yeah.
And in a discovery to discover my authentic self. They were tools that I used to peel back all of the layers, but they're tools that I still use now. Kind of once you master the 9 principles in times of stress and endurance, they realign you, because the moment you feel out of alignment, it's very easy then to pinpoint. And so the principles are actions and behaviors that we live out. It starts with awareness, which is that permission to stop, that permission to just stop and actually allow yourself to be aware of what's going on in the world around you, what your responses are, and what your body's telling you. And, instead of, and I think we all do it, I often say that, we push aside our feelings all the time. And yet that, we know essentially that it's our inner self calling us.
Yeah.
And I say it's like we get a text message and it's like your inner self texting you and you ignore the text. And so then they ring and you ignore the call. So then they ring back again kind of thing. And it becomes this whole thing. And so the point of awareness is when that feeling comes up is to then ask why. So when I do the workplace well-being, quite often people will say, I'm stressed. And I'll say, but you're not stressed, are you? You're not stressed. You're so-and-so. You're Jody. You're not stressed. You're Jody. What you mean is, I feel stressed. So now let's look at why you feel stressed. Because in that, when you say I'm stressed, you're then identifying as stressed. And so you're going to be stressed because you've said, I am stressed. So that awareness is about, let's really look at what's going on here. So when someone says, I'm stressed, I say, no, you feel stressed. Now, let's look at why you feel stressed. When do you feel stressed the most? What's really causing you stress? Because that then allows you to break it down. And it's the same, clients come to me and they say, I feel overwhelmed. And then I'm like, describe it to me.
Yeah.
Describe what overwhelm is. Like, describe what's overwhelming you. Describe when you feel it. Because we don't. We operate so fast as human beings that we use these words and we move on. And when we use a word like that has an emotion, there's a why and a connection behind it. And awareness, the first point, is about understanding what's behind that emotion. Then you move on to understanding, because then once you've unpacked that stuff, you need to understand where it's coming from. And understanding builds a bridge between these emotions and your inner self.
Yeah.
And then it connects it to your values. And in understanding that connection, you really get to see, what's going on here and how it does or doesn't fit in your life, or how a situation is pulling you off of alignment, or how you need to pull a situation back into alignment to serve you.
Yeah.
The next one is trust, which trust is about self-belief. I do a lot of work with clients on what I call inner protectors. So we all have imposter syndrome, self-doubt, internal critic, all of these things that show up that make us not believe ourselves. And they're there essentially to protect you. They're positive, and that's why I call them, your imposter syndrome is in fact a protector. The problem is it's operating from a piece of information from years ago that no longer fits.
Yeah.
So in trust, in learning to trust your decisions, in learning to trust your gut, in learning to trust your ability to grow and move forward. And so, as you go through, like I was saying, things come up and you'll say to yourself, is this awareness, is this understanding that I need right now? Or is this a trust issue I have with myself? Am I not moving forward because I don't trust myself? And do I need to look at those things? Now, after trust comes honesty, and honesty is liberating. Honesty is that self-honesty. It's scary, but it's done with compassion, because honesty is all the little white lies that we tell ourselves that keep us locked in place.
Yeah.
Particularly like that, when we're looking at, burnout and things like that, am I really being honest about this? Am I being honest about how I'm showing up? Am I being honest about how I feel about my job? Am I being honest about those things? And honesty has a second purpose in that it regulates belief, self-belief, because trust can give you amazing self-belief. But the thing about self-belief is if it's not regulated, you can believe anything.
Yeah.
And so what honesty does is honesty works in part with that, is learning to trust yourself and then learning to be honest about yourself in that moment.
Yeah.
And then the next thing was, the next of the principles is empowerment. And empowerment is about understanding the power of the fact that you are holding the pen. You as the individual are holding the pen.
Yeah.
You get to write the story. Okay. So empowerment is about that, is about, okay, well, what is it I want? I've got the pen in my hand. I can write what happens next. And also I do a lot of work around, becoming, essentially. Like I say to all my clients, the easiest way to be anything is to be it in that moment, not to put it in the distance, but in that moment. So if I want to, get fitter and healthier, then the easiest way to do that is in that moment to say, I am someone who honors my health and fitness and works to progress further. I'm not saying I'm going to be healthy. I'm saying
I'm already
I am.
Yeah.
I'm already healthy. But you know what? I'm someone that honors it and works hard to move that forward. And then that takes away some overwhelm.
Yeah.
Because this isn't now this thing that you're trying to reach for. It's not this thing where you're again pushing yourself. This is something that you have will become even greater in the future. But what you've done is you've taken it from the future, you've brought it to now, and you embody it. And when you choose those kind of things, the psychology now shows it. It was a bit of a myth, but there's research now coming out in flaws, is that, so it's self-fulfilling prophecy. If you tell yourself enough that you're fit and healthy, what will happen is you will draw fit and healthy behaviors towards you. So you will automatically make the choices of a fit, healthy person. So food becomes easier, diet becomes easier, exercise becomes easier, because they're not things you have to do. They are things that a fit, healthy person does, and you are a fit, healthy person. And if anybody takes one thing away from this podcast today, if you do that every day for a month, get up and look yourself in the mirror and say, I am whatever it is you want to be, I promise you that you will start to see the shift. And you'll think it's like magic, because all of a sudden you'll be like, well, how did that happen? But it's not magic. It was there all along. You are now driving the core of you in the direction that you truly want to be.
Yeah.
Amazing. So empowerment is pretty amazing, because and that's why it's called empowerment, because it's really energizing. The moment you decide, actually, I am, and go. Now, in that thing of creating change and everything, and, we do need to have goals, and there are some things that we have to accept that we have to work towards. And so nurture is N, and nurture is about that. Nurture is about nurturing change. It doesn't happen in one big shift. And nurture is about understanding that process, that any big change that we want is, in fact, hundreds of small incremental changes over time. So, nurture is about breaking down that process. And I use something called SMARTer goals when I coach people around nurture. Specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, time-bound. We've all done them 100 times. But I always felt they didn't work for me because they missed something. And so the reason that I do something that I invented called Smarter Goals is that the E is for emotion and the R is for reward. Because the emotion is, why does it matter to you? Why is it important? And how is it a part of who you are? Yeah. So, if you want to run a marathon and you've never run before, but you say, I am someone who is fit and healthy and honours their strength by constantly striving to be a better runner. When you write your goal about, this week I'm going to do 1k, 2k, 3k, the emotion that keeps you in that, in the hard moments, is because that is who you are. It's not because you're trying to put something else on or force a change. It's because that is a behaviour that is attached to who you are. And the final one is the reward, because in those tough moments, I do a lot about visualization with clients. And, when it comes to goals, if you can sit for 10 minutes and visualize, like feel it, imagine it, if it's winning a race, whatever it is, sit there and visualize what the end point of that goal is and feel it in your body. Feel it like everything, that moment, like, what does it sound like? What does it feel like? What does it taste like? How do I feel? What's my energy? Because you will then be able to anchor back into that reward that is in the future, but in the hard moments, you will remind yourself that that is where you're heading. And so that's nurture. Now, after that, the last three are really, the first three are about pausing, the second three are about planning, and the last three are about protecting. And so the first one is transformation. And when we go through major changes in our lives, and I say that it's not change, it's transformation, because you're not changing from something entirely different. There are lots of bits of you that are going on the journey. It's just that you're leaving some behind and you're adding some in. So it's about transformation. And in that transformation, it's not saying that the previous me wasn't good enough. It was just accepting that the previous me was on a journey. So this is a journey and a transformation. It's also about honouring the bits that we maybe thought were our not so good bits. The worst bits of ourselves are actually the bits that give us strength, because they're the moments where we forged character. So in your hardest moments, your great trauma, those are the moments where you forged character, and those are the bits that will fit you for your journey moving on. And so transformation is about understanding this sense of becoming, and that there isn't an end point, because we will constantly continue to transform as human beings. And so after transformation is integrity. And integrity is about knowing your truth, owning your truth, and never letting anybody steal your truth. So making sure that everything you do is anchored in your values, in that you showing up authentically. And if people challenge that, you stand up for it and you don't let them challenge it, because you've worked hard for that. And that's where then that's integrity is there to protect that betrayal, because if you move away from that line, that's not integrity. So integrity is about walking your truth. And standing in it. I sometimes say to people, it's about showing up as you unapologetically. That's it. It's showing up as you without apology. And the final one that is at the kind of, we do it last because it seals the deal on all the others. However, it is constantly present through them all, and that is compassion. And this isn't compassion for others. This is back to in service of yourself. This is self-compassion. And so it's learning to be kind to yourself, to understand that you are enough as you are in that moment, and that we are all perfectly, and there is no such thing as broken. We are all a work in progress. And the other part of compassion is about forgiveness, but not forgiveness of others. I'd like to think everybody can be forgiving, and some of it is about learning to forgive other people. But, in my experience with myself and my work, the person that we don't forgive, the person that we frequently forget to forgive, is ourselves. We forgive other people for the wrongs they did to us, but we don't forgive ourselves, and we usually carry guilt about those situations. And so what clients do in the last kind of thing in the compassion is they write themselves a letter of forgiveness, and they post the letter to themselves, and it arrives through the post. And then they sit down and they open the letter of forgiveness, and then they can really move forward. And that's those principles. And, they are very much have become, they saved me in that process. I discovered them because they were all things that I was doing. And, and then obviously I realized that there was this kind of thing of drawing together, since I was in my 20s, I've been a complete self-help and psychology and mental health geek. I've read book upon book upon book. What the 9 Principles does is it anchors all of that knowledge together. It brings you to a point where, you can kind of, in understanding, look to other experts as well. And so they become a constant then that allows you to live a life authentically, aligned to who you are by the 9 Principles.
Yeah, thank you so much. This has really been amazing. Thank you for sharing a whole lot of insight, trust, honesty, knowledge, transformation, critical compassion. Yeah, thank you so much. That's really been amazing. Our audience would love to reach out to you, especially for your coaching sections and how you make those decisions and those 9 principles. How can they reach out to you, and where's the best platform?
The easiest place to reach out to me is on my website, which is authenticcoaching.me. And then if you go on my website, there's a free to join community where you can message me, get in touch, chat with me. And also there are some free tools. So like this one, which is called Start Stopping. And that's exactly what we were talking about today. And so that's it's like a little 2-hour project for yourself that starts you on that process of stopping and catching your breath and deciding what's next and what to quit and what to put back into your life.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jody. This has really been amazing, and thank you for the whole lot of insight. Yeah, your story just reminded us that sometimes the bravest win begin with the necessary quit, the mask, the pressure, and the pattern that slowly destroy. Yeah, it's really a pleasure and honor having you on the show once again.
Thank you. No, it was lovely to be here.